Hey guys, this is Jason from the Alliance Project, Jason Jeffries. I wanted to show you a couple things real quick before I went into today's project. So I'm going to share my screen for a moment. All right. Now, we got these videos here. I wanted to show people how they're blocked. I'm actually being filtered and censored out of countries, entire countries. So I wanted to show people firsthand, so they knew that when people said this kind of stuff, they weren't just making things up. So give me 1 minute here. It should pull up. It takes a minute when I'm doing a screen share sometimes. Okay, so I'm back here. It's saying I can't be viewed in Guernsey, Ireland, Isle of Man, Jersey, or the United Kingdom. Yeah, it's really odd, and I thought I'd share that with you. Today is going to be about the Hermetic Teachings. I'm going to go ahead and go over some of the teachings of Thoth from back when he was Hermes. This one is really dear to my heart. Helped me understand a lot on my path. So figured I'd share with you guys. And yeah, yeah, I had a couple other things I want to show you guys. I got a selenite crystal. I want to show you how it kind of shines at different angles. Pretty cool, huh? And this is for K. White sage, make sure it has white string. And why not make some give you guys some examples. If you're looking for to find some crystals and stones and you're starting the collection, recommend everybody get a piece of quartz and like a prism. And I also recommend people to maybe start with getting small ones. This is what I started with. Just little glass bottles filled with what you need. And then when you figure out what's working for you, what feels good, what resonates with you, then you can go and get larger ones. As you see, this it looks really dull this way until you get it just at the right angle. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and start reading, and I hope you guys enjoy. I'll try to keep my face up here in the corner. I don't know how big I can go. Some people rather kind of see you here, so you can. So it's not like they're just reading. So maybe I'll do it like that. Okay. I'm gonna light my cigarette that I know you guys are gonna bitch at me for. Can't find my normal lighter, so give me a second. All right, here we go. We take great pleasure in presenting to. Wait, let me mute my TV. I got the television on. Sorry. We take great pleasure in presenting to the attention of the students and investigators of the secret doctrines this little work based upon the world-old Hermetic teachings. There's been so little written upon this subject, notwithstanding the countless references to the teachings and many works upon occultism, that the many earnest searchers after the arcane truths will doubtlessly welcome the appearance of this present volume. The purpose of this work is not the enunciation of any special philosophy or doctrine, but rather is to give students a statement of the truth that will serve to reconcile the many bits of occult knowledge that may have been acquired, but which are apparently opposed to each other and which often serve to discourage and disgust the beginner in the study. Our intent is not to erect a new temple of knowledge, but rather to place in the hands of a student a master key in which he may open many inner doors of the temple of mystery through the main portals he has already entered. There is no portion of the occult teachings possessed by the world which have been so closely guarded as the fragments of Hermetic teachings which have come down to us over the tens of centuries which have elapsed since the lifetime of its great founder, Hermes Trismegistus, the scribe of the gods, who dwelt in old Egypt in the days when the present race of man was in infancy, contemporary with Abraham, and if the legends be true, an instructor of that venerable sage. Hermes was and is the great central sun of occultism, whose rays have served to illumine the countless teachings which have promulgated since its time. And the fundamental and basic teachings embedded inside the esoteric teachings of every race may be tracked back to Hermes. Even the most ancient teachings of India undoubtedly have their roots in the original Hermetic teachings. From the land of Ganges, many advanced occultists wandered to the land of Egypt and sat at the feet of the master. From him they obtained the master key, which explained and reconciled their divergent views, and thus the secret doctrine was firmly established. From other lands also came other learned ones, all whom regarded Hermes as the master of masters, and his influence was so great that in spite of the many wanderings from the path on the part of the centuries of teachers in the different lands, there may still be found a certain basic resemblance and correspondence which underlies that many and often quite divergent theories entertained and taught by the occultists of these different lands today. The student of comparative religions will be able to perceive the influence of Hermetic teachings in every religion worthy of a name, now known to man. Whether it be a dead religion or one in full vigor in our own times, there is always certain correspondence in spite of the contradictory features, and the Hermetic teachings act as a great reconciler. The life work of Hermes seems to have been in the direction of planting the great seed of truth, which has grown and blossomed into many strange forms, rather to establish a school of philosophy which would dominate the world's thought. But nevertheless, the original truths taught by him have been kept intact by their original purity by a few men each age, who, refusing great numbers of half-developed students and followers, followed the Hermetic custom and reserved their truth for the few who are ready to comprehend and master it. From lip to ear, the truth has been handed down among the few. There has always been a few initiates in each generation, in the various lands of the earth, who have kept alive the sacred flame of the Hermetic teachings, and such have always been willing to use their lamps to relight the lesser lamps of the outside world. When the light of truth grew dim and clouded by reason of neglect, and when the wicks became clogged with foreign matter, there were always a few to tend faithfully the altar of truth, upon which has kept alight the perpetual lamp of wisdom. These men devoted their lives to the labor of love, which the poet has so well stated in his lines. By the way, this book's called the Kybalion, and good luck finding anything about it on YouTube. It seems if there is, it's labeled like Illuminati, this, that, the other. They'll label it wrong, or they'll just take it down outright. So, yeah. The Kybalion, Kybalion. It's written by 3 initiates of the Hermetic teachings that were taught by Hermes himself, Thoth himself. Oh, let not the flame die out, cherished age after age in its dark cavern, in its holy temples cherished, fed by pure ministers of love. Let not the flame die out. These men have never sought popular approval, nor numbers of followers. They are indifferent to these things, for they know how few there are in each generation who are ready for the truth, and who would recognize it if it were presented to them. They reserve the strong meat for men, while others furnish like milk for babies. They reserve their pearls of wisdom for a few elect who recognize their value and who wear them in their crowns, instead of casting them before the materialistic vulgar swine who would trample them in the mud and mix them with their disgusting mental food. But still, these men who have never forgotten or overlooked the original teachings of Hermes, regarding the passing on of the words of truth to those who are ready to receive it, which teaching is stated in the Kybalion as follows: Where fall the footsteps of the master, the ears of those ready for his teachings open wide. And again, when the ears of the student are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom. But their customary attitude has always been strictly in accordance with other Hermetic aphorism. Also in the Kybalion, the lips of wisdom are closed, except to ears of understanding. There are those who criticize the attitude of the Hermeticists, and who have claimed they did not manifest their proper spirit in the policy of seclusion and reticence. But a moment's glance back over the pages of history will show the wisdom of the masters who knew the folly of attempting to teach the world that which it was neither ready or willing to receive. The Hermeticists have never sought to be martyrs, and have instead sat silently aside with a pitying smile on their closed lips, while the heathen raged noisily about them, and their customary amusement putting to death and torture the honest but misguided enthusiasts who imagined that they could force upon a race of barbarians the truth capable of being understood only by the elect few who had advanced along the path. And the spirit of persecution has not yet died out in the land. There are certain Hermetic teachings in which publicly promulgated would bring down into the teachers a great cry of scorn and revilement from the multitude, who had again raised the cry of crucify, crucify. In this little work we have endeavored to give you an idea of the fundamental teachings of the Kybalion, striving to give you the working principles, leaving you to apply them to yourselves, rather than attempting to work out the teachings in detail. If you are a true student, you'll be able to work out and apply these principles. If not, then you must develop yourself into one. And otherwise, the Hermetic teachings will be words, words, words to you. Signed, the Three Initiates. Chapter 1, the Hermetic Philosophy. The lips of wisdom are closed except to ears of understanding. From old Egypt have come the fundamental esoteric and occult teachings which have been strongly influenced by the philosophies of all races, nations, and peoples for several thousand years. Egypt, the home of the pyramids and the Sphinx, was the birthplace of the hidden wisdom and mystic teachings. From her secret doctrine, all nations have borrowed. India, Persia, Chaldea, Media, China, Japan, Assyria, ancient Greece, and Rome, and the other ancient countries partook liberally at the feast of knowledge with the Hierophants and the masters of the land of Isis, so freely provided for those who came prepared to partake in the great store of mystic and occult lore which the masterminds of the ancient land had gathered together. In ancient Egypt dwelt the great adepts and masters who have never been surpassed, and who have seldom have been equaled. During the centuries they have taken their processional flight since the days of great Hermes. In Egypt was located the great lodge of lodges of the mystics. At the doors of her temple entered the neophytes, who afterwards, the hierophants, adepts, and masters, traveled to the four corners of the earth, carrying with them precious knowledge, which, when they were ready, anxious and willing to pass on to those who are ready to receive the same. All students of the occult recognized the debt that they owe to the venerable masters of the ancient land. But among these great masters of the ancient Egypt, there once dwelt one whom masters hailed as the master of masters. This man, if man indeed he was, dwelt in Egypt in the earliest days. He was known as Hermes Trismegistus. He was the father of occult wisdom, the founder of astrology, the discoverer of alchemy. The details of his life story are lost to history. Owing to the lapse of years, through several of the ancient countries disputed with each other in their claims to honor and having furnished his birthplace, and this thousands of years ago. The dates of his sojourn in Egypt and that his last carnation on his planet is not now known, but has been fixed at the early days of the oldest dynasties of Egypt, long before the day of Moses. The best authorities regard him as a contemporary of Abraham, and some of the Jewish traditions go as far to claim that Abraham acquired a portion of his mystic knowledge from Hermes himself. As the years rolled by after his passing from the plane of life, tradition recording that he lived 300 years in the flesh, the Egyptians defied Hermes. They made him one of their gods under the name of Thoth. Years after, the people of the ancient Greece also made him one of their many gods, calling him Hermes, the god of wisdom. The Egyptians revered his memory for centuries, yes, tens of centuries, calling him the scribe of the gods, and bestowing upon him distinctly his ancient title, Trismegistus, which means thrice great, 3 times great, the great, 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 greatest, etc., in all ancient lands. The name of Hermes Trismegistus was revered. So, Trismegistus, 3 times the great, 333. The name being synonymous with the fount of wisdom. Even to this day, we use the term Hermetic in the sense of secret, sealed so that nothing can escape, etc. And this, by reason of the fact of the followers of Hermes have always observed the principle of secrecy in their teachings. They did not believe in casting pearls before swine, but rather held the teachings for teaching milk for babes, meat for strong men, both of which are maxims of familiar to readers of the Christian sculptures, but both of which have been used by the Egyptians for centuries before the Christian era. And this policy of careful dissemination of the truth has always characterized the Hermetics. Even under the present day, the Hermetic teachings are to be found in all lands, among all religions, and never identified with any particular country, nor any particular religious sect. This is because of the warning of the ancient teachers against the allowing of the secret doctrine to become crystallized into a creed. The wisdom of this caution is apparent in all students of history. The ancient occultism in India and Persia degenerated and was largely lost, owing to the fact that the teachers became priests and so mixed theology with philosophy, the result being occultism in India and Persia had been gradually lost amidst the mass of religious superstition, cults, creeds, and gods. So it was to ancient Greece and Rome. So it was with Hermetic teachings of the Gnostics and early Christians, which were lost at the time of Constantine, whose iron hand smothered philosophy with the blanket of theology, losing the Christian church that was in its very essence and spirit, and causing it to grope through several centuries before it found a way back to the ancient faith. The indications apparent to all careful observers in this 20th century being that the church is now struggling to get back to its ancient mystic teachings. But there has always been a few faithful souls who kept alive the flame, tending it carefully and not allowing its light to become extinguished. And that's to these staunch hearts and fearless minds, we have the truth still with us. But it is not found in books to any great extent. It has been passed along from master to student, from initiate to hierophant, from lip to ear. When it has been written down at all, its meaning was veiled in terms of alchemy and astrology, so that only those possessing the key could read it outright. This was made necessary in order to avoid persecutions of theologians in the Middle Ages who fought the secret doctrine with fire and sword, stake and gibbet and cross. Even to this day, there will be found but few reliable books on Hermetic philosophy, although there are countless references to many books on various pages of occultism. And yet, the Hermetic philosophy is only the master key which will open all doors into occult teachings. In the early days, there was a compilation of certain basic Hermetic doctrines passed on from teacher to student, which was known as the Kybalion. The exact significance and the meaning of the term have been lost for several centuries. This teaching, however, is known to many whom it has descended from mouth to ear, on and on throughout the centuries. Its precepts have never been written down or printed, so far as we know. It was merely a collection of maxims, axioms, and precepts, which were not non-understandable to outsiders, but which were readily understood by students after the axioms, maxims, and precepts have been explained to be exemplified by the Hermetic initiates to their neophytes. These teachings really constituted the basic principles of the art of Hermetic alchemy, which, contrary to the general belief, dealt in the mastery of mental forces rather than material elements, the transmutation of one kind of mental vibration into another, instead of changing of one kind of metal into another. The legends of the Philosopher's Stone, which turned base metal into gold, was an allegory relating to the whole Hermetic philosophy, readily understood by all students of true Hermeticism. In this little book, of which this is the first lesson, we invite our students to examine the Hermetic Teachings as set forth in the Kybalion, and as explained by ourselves, humble students of the teachings, who, while bearing the titles of initiates, are still students at the feet of Hermes, the Master. We herein give you many of the maxims and axioms and precepts of the Kybalion, accompanied by explanations and illustrations which we deem likely render the teachings more easily comprehended by the modern student, particularly as the original text is purposely veiled in obscure terms. The original maxims, axioms, and precepts of the Kybalion are printed herein in italics, the proper credit being given. Our own work is printed the regular way in the body of the work. We trust that many students who we now offer this little work will derive as much benefit from the study of its pages as have the many who have gone on before, treading the same path of mystery throughout the centuries that have passed since the time of Hermes Trismegistus, master of masters, the great, the word of the Kybalion. Maya, stop. For where fall the footsteps of the masters, the ears of those ready up for his teachings open wide. When the ears of the students are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom. So that according to the teachings, the passage of this book to those ready for instruction will attract the attention of such as are prepared to receive the teaching. And likewise, when the pupil is ready to receive the truth, then will this little book come to him or her. Such is the law, the Hermetic principle of cause and effect. In its aspect of the law of attraction, it will bring lips and ears together, pupil and book in company. So mote it be. Chapter 2. The 7 Hermetic Principles. Principles of the truth are 7. He who knows these, understandingly, possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. The 7 Hermetic principles upon which the entire Hermetic philosophy is based are as follows: the principle of mentalism, the principle of correspondence, the principle of vibration, the principle of polarity, the principle of rhythm, the principle of cause and effect, and the principle of gender. These 7 principles will be discussed and explained as we proceed with these lessons. A short explanation of each, however, may as well be given at this point. The principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. The principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances which we know under the terms as the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, that is apparent in our material senses, is spirit, which in itself is unknowable, undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as a universal, infinite living mind. It also explains that all these phenomenal world and universe is simply mental creation of the all, subject of the law of created things, and that the universe as a whole, and in its parts or units, has its existence in the mind of the all, in which mind we live and move and have our being. This principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all the varied mental and psychic phenomena that accompany such a large portion of the public's attention, and which, without such explanation, are non-understandable and defy scientific treatment. An understanding of this great Hermetic principle of mentalism enables the individual to readily grasp the laws of the universe and apply the same to his well-being and advancement. The Hermetic student is enabled to apply intelligently the great mental laws, instead of using them in a haphazard manner. With the master key in his possession, the student may unlock the many doors of mental and psychic temple of knowledge, and enter the same freely and intelligently. This principle explains the true nature of energy, power, and matter, and how all of these are subordinate to the mastery of the mind. One of the old Hermetic masters wrote long ages ago, "He who grasps the truth of mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path to mastery." And these words are true today as at the time they were first written. Without this master key, mastery is impossible, and the student's knocks in the vain at the many doors of the temple. 2. Principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As above, so above. Or as below, so above. As above, so below. As below, so above. There you go, right? This principle embodies the truth that there's always correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being and life. The old Hermetic axiom ran in these words: as above, so below. As below, so above. And the grasping of this principle gives one the means of solving many dark paradoxes and the hidden secret of nature. There are planes beyond our knowing, but when we apply the principle of correspondence to them, we are able to understand that much of that would otherwise would be unknowable to us. This principle is the universal application and manifestation on the various planes of the material, mental, and spiritual universe. It is the universal law. The ancient Hermeticists considered this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man would be able to pry aside the obstacles which hid from view the unknown. Its use even tore aside the veil of Isis to the extent that glimpse of the face of the goddess might be caught. Just as knowledge of the principles of geometry enables man to measure distances, suns, and their movements while seated in his observatory, so a knowledge of the principle of correspondence enables man to reason intelligently from known to the unknown. Studying the monad, he understands the archangel. The principles of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. The principal embodiment that the truth, that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing is at rest. Facts which modern science endorses, and which each new scientific discovery tends to verify. And yet this Hermetic principle was enunciated thousands of years ago by the masters of ancient Egypt. This principle explains that the differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely in varying rates of vibration. From the all, which is pure spirit, down to the grossest form of matter, all is in vibration. The higher the vibration, the higher the position in the scale. The vibration of spirit is at such an infinite rate of intensity and rapidity that it practically is at rest, that it is practically at rest, just as rapidly moving wheel seems to be motionless. And at the other end of the scale, there are gross forms of matter whose vibrations are so slow as to be seen at rest. Between these poles, there are millions and upon millions of varying degrees of vibration, from corpuscle to electron, atom to molecule, to the worlds to universes. Everything is in vibratory motion. This is also true on the planes of energy and force, which are but varying degrees of vibration, and also on the mental planes, whose states depend upon vibrations, and even to those on the spiritual planes. An understanding of this principle with the appropriate formulas enables Hermetic students to control their own mental vibrations as well as others. The masters also apply this principle conquering of natural phenomena in various ways. He who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power, says one of the old writers. Principle of polarity. I'm going to pause it for 1 minute. Okay. So the principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has pairs of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet, all truths but half-truths. All paradoxes must be reconciled. Meaning anything that has a dualistic or a polar opposite is only part of a greater whole. Both are only half, and adding them together is the full. There is only one. There is only one source, the all, right? That's what they're saying. You can't have this God, right, a source of all, and then have something that is opposing it as well. It doesn't. The source is everything. It is the source of everything. So it can't be subtracted from, added to, divided, or essentially not even exist for not even a minute. So, because if something doesn't exist, it can't be created. Nothing can be created. Something can't be created out of nothing, and something can never be nothing. Okay? It's always transmuted, changing, and that's it. The only constants change. This principle embodies the truth that everything is dual. Everything has two poles. Everything has its pair of opposites, all of which were old Hermetic axioms. It explains the old paradoxes that have perplexed so many, which have been stated as follows. Thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, differing only in degree. The pair of opposites may be reconciled. Extremes meet. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half-false. And there are two sides to everything, etc., etc., etc. It explains that in everything there are two poles or opposite aspects, and that opposites are really only the two extremes of the same thing, which many varying degrees between them. To illustrate, heat and cold, although opposites are really the same thing. Differences consisting merely of degrees of the same thing. Look at your thermometer and see if you can discover where heat terminates and cold begins. There's no such thing as absolute heat or absolute cold. The two terms heat and cold simply indicate varying degrees of the same thing. And that same thing which manifests as heat or cold is merely a form, variety, a rate of vibration. So heat and cold are simply the two poles of which we call heat, and the phenomena attendant thereupon are the same thing. The difference consists, and the phenomena attendant thereupon manifestations of the principle of polarity. The same principle is manifest in the case of light and darkness, which are the same thing, the difference consisting of the varying degrees between the two poles of the phenomenon. Where does darkness leave off and light begin? Where is the difference between large and small, between hard and soft, between black and white, between sharp and dull, between noise and quiet, between high and low, between positive and negative? The principles of polarity explains these paradoxes. And no other principle can supersede it. The same principle operates on the mental plane. Let us take a radical and extreme example, that of love and hate. Two mental states, apparently totally different. And yet these are degrees of hate and degrees of love. And in the middle point, we use the term dislike or like, which shade into each other so gradually that sometimes we are lost to know whether we like or dislike or neither. And all are simply degrees of the same thing. As you will see, if you will but think a moment, and more than this, and considered of more importance by the Hermeticists, is it is possible to change the vibrations of hate to the vibrations of love in one's own mind, and in the minds of others. Many of you who read these lines have had personal experiences of the involuntary rapid transition from love to hate, and the reverse, in your own case and that of others, who will therefore realize the possibility of this being accomplished by the use of free will, by the means of the Hermetic formulas. Good and evil are but poles of the same thing. The Hermeticists understood the art of transmuting evil into good by means of an application of the principle of polarity. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy, known and practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. And understanding the principle will enable one to change his own polarity, as well as that of others. All right, sorry. He will devote the time and study necessary to master the art. The principle of rhythm. All right, I think Stephen, I think he'll like this. Embry, if you're out there listening, I'm sure you'll watch it sometime. But I think these principles will come to you as you really like music and how it relates to the universe. So hope you get something out of this. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swings and manifests in everything. The measure of that swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. This principle embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measure of motion, to and fro, a flow and inflow, a swing backward and forward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and low tide, between the two poles which exist in accordance to the principle of polarity described a moment ago. There is always an action and reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and sinking. This is the affairs of the universe, suns, worlds, men, animals, minds, energy, and matter. This law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and the fall of nations, in the life of all things, and finally in the mental states of man. And it is within this latter that the Hermeticists find the understanding of the principle most important. The Hermeticists have grasped that the principle, finding its universal application and having also discovered certain means of overcoming its effects themselves by the use of appropriate formulas and methods. They apply the mental law of neutralization. I gotta light my cigarette again. They themselves, cannot annul the principle or cause it to cease in operation, but they have learned how to escape its effects upon themselves to a certain degree, depending on the mastery of the principle. They have learned how to use it instead of being used by it. And this and similar methods consist the art of Hermeticists. The master of Hermetics polarizes himself at the point at which he desires to rest, and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum, which would tend to carry him to other pole. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery do this to a certain degree, more or less unconsciously. But the master does this consciously and by the use of his will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses who are swung backward and forward like the pendulum. This principle and that of polarity has been closely studied by Hermeticists, and the methods of counteracting, neutralizing, and using them form an important part of the Hermetic mental alchemy. 6. The principle of cause and effect. Everything has cause. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the fact that there's cause and effect for it. There's a cause for every effect, an effect from every cause. It explains that everything happens according to law, that nothing ever merely happens, that there's no such thing as chance, and that while there are various planes of cause and effects, the higher dominating the lower planes, still nothing ever entirely escapes the law. The Hermeticists understand the art and methods of rising above the ordinary plane and cause and effect to a certain degree. And by mentally rising to a higher plane, they become causers instead of effectors. Or effects, I'm sorry. Causers instead of effects. The masses of people who are carried along, obedient to the environment and wills and desires of others, stronger than themselves, heredity, suggestion, and the outward causes moving them like a pawn on the chessboard of life. But the masters, rising above the plane, dominate their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the environment surrounding them. They become movers instead of the pawns. They help to play the game of life instead of being played and moved about by others' wills and environments. They use the principle instead of being its tools. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to rule on their own plane. In this statement, there's condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge. Let him read who can. So this is obviously going to take, it's going to take a couple episodes, but I'm just going to crunch it out, find good stopping spots, and upload them as I go. So yeah, just I hope you guys use this as a reference, come back and maybe even mute my stupid ass out and watch it sometimes. But anyways, the principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. This principle embodies the truth that gender is manifested in everything, masculine and feminine, principles ever at work. This is true not only in the physical plane, but on the mental and even spiritual planes. On the physical plane, the principle manifests as sex. On the higher planes, it takes on higher forms, but the principle is ever the same. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without the principle. An understanding of its laws will throw light on many a subject that has perplexed the minds of men. The principle of gender works ever in the direction of generation, regeneration, creation. Everything and every person contains two elements or principles, or this great principle within it, him or her. Every male thing has a female element. Also, every female contains a male principle. If you would understand the philosophy of mental and spiritual creation, generation, and regeneration, you must understand that the study of the Hermetic principle. It contains the solution of many of the mysteries of life. We caution you that this principle has no reference to the many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teachings, and practices which are taught under fanciful titles and which are a prostitution of the great natural principle of gender. Such base revivals of the ancient infamous forms of the phallicism tend to ruin mind, body, and soul, and the Hermetic philosophy has never sounded the warning note against these degraded teachings which tend towards lust, licentious, and perversion of the nature's principles. If you seek such teachings, you must go elsewhere for them. Hermeticism contains nothing for you along these lines. To the pure, all things are pure. To the base, all things are base. Chapter 3, Mental Transmutation. Mind, as well as metals and elements, can be transmuted from state to state, degree to degree, condition to condition, pole to pole, vibration to vibration. True Hermetic transmutation is a mental art. As we have stated, The Hermeticists were the original alchemists, astrologers, and psychologists. Hermes, being the founder of these schools of thought. I know I read that funny, but that's how it goes. Hermes, having been the founder of these schools of thought. I should have just read that last word with a period. Sorry about that. I'm getting better. From astrology has grown modern astronomy. From alchemy has grown modern chemistry. From the mystic psychology has grown modern psychology of the schools. But it must not be supposed that the ancients were ignorant of that which the modern schools suppose to be their exclusive and special property. The records engraved on the stones of ancient Egypt show conclusively that the ancients had a full comprehensive knowledge of astronomy, and the very building of the pyramids show the connection between their design and the study of astronomical science. Nor were they ignorant of chemistry, for the fragments of ancient writings show that they were acquainted with chemical properties of things. In fact, the ancient theories regarding physics are being slowly verified by the latest discoveries of modern science, notably those relating to the constitution of matter. Nor must it be supposed that they were ignorant of the so-called modern discoveries in psychology. On the contrary, the Egyptians were especially skilled in the science of psychology, particularly in the branches that were modern schools ignored, but which nevertheless are being uncovered under the name of psychic science, which is perplexing the psychologists of today and making them reluctantly admit that there may be something in it after all. The truth is that beneath the material chemistry, astronomy, and psychology that is the psychology in the phase of the brain action, the ancients possessed the knowledge of transcendental astronomy, called astrology. The transcendental chemistry, called alchemy, of transcendental psychology, called mystic psychology. They possess the inner knowledge as well as the outer knowledge, the latter alone being possessed by modern scientists. Among the many secret branches of knowledge possessed the Hermeticists was that known of the mental transmutation, which forms the subject matter of this lesson. Okay. Transmutation is a term usually employed to designate the ancient art of transmutation of metals, particularly of base metals into gold. The word transmute means to change from one nature, form, or substance into another, to transform. And accordingly, mental transmutation means the art of changing and transforming mental states, forms, and conditions into others. So you may see the mental transmutation is the art of mental chemistry, if you like the term, a form of practical mystic psychology. But this means far more than appears on the surface. Transmutation, alchemy, and chemistry on the mental plane is important enough in its effects to be sure. And if the art stopped there, it would be one of the most important branches known to man. But this is only the beginning. Well, let us see why. First of the 7 Hermetic principles is the principle of mentalism, the axiom of which the all is mind, the universe is mental, which means that the underlying reality of the universe is mind. The universe itself is mental, that is, existing in the mind of the all. Okay? We shall consider this principle in succeeding lessons, but let us see of the effects of this principle if it is assumed to be true. If the universe is mental in its nature, then mental transmutation must be the art of changing the conditions of the universe along the lines of matter, force, and mind. So you see, therefore, that mental transmutation is really the magic in which the ancient writers had so much to say about in their mystical works, and about what they gave so few practical instructions. If all be mental, then the art which enables one to transmute mental conditions must render the master of controller the material conditions as well as ordinarily called mental. As a matter of fact, none but advanced mental alchemists have been able to attain the degree of power necessary to control the grosser physical conditions, such as the control of the elements of nature, the production or cessation of the tempests, the production and cessation of earthquakes, and other great physical phenomena. But that such men have existed and do exist today is a matter of earnest belief to all advanced occultists of the school. That the master exists and have these powers. The best teachers assure their students, having had experiences which justify them in such belief and statements. These masters do not make public exhibitions of their powers, but seek seclusion from the crowds of men in order to better their work there may along the path of attainment. We mention their existence at this point merely to call your attention to the fact that their power is entirely mental and it operates along the lines of higher mental transmutation under the Hermetic principle of mentalism. The universe is mental. But students and Hermeticists of lesser degree than masters, the initiates and teachers, are able to freely work along the mental plane in mental transmutation. In fact, all that we call physical or psychic phenomena, mental influence, mental science, new thought phenomena, etc., operates along the same general lines. For there is but one principle involved, no matter but by what name the phenomena be called. The students and practitioner of mental transmutation works along the mental plane, transmuting metals, mental elements, states, etc., into others according to various formulas, more or less efficacious. The various treatments, affirmations, denials, etc. of the schools of mental science are but formulas, often quite imperfect and unscientific, of the Hermetic art. The majority of modern practitioners are quite ignorant compared to the ancient masters, for they lack the fundamental knowledge upon which the work is based. Not only may the mental states, etc., of one's self be changed and transmuted by Hermetic methods, but also the states of others may be and are constantly transmuted in the same way, usually unconsciously, but often consciously by some understanding the laws and principles, in cases where people are affected or not informed of the principles of self-perfection. And more than this, as many students and practitioners of modern mental science know, every material condition depending upon the minds of other peoples may be changed or transmuted in accordance with the earnest desire, will, and treatments of the persons desiring to change conditions of life. The public are so generally informed regarding these things at present that we do not deem it necessary to mention the same at length, our purpose at this point being merely to show Hermetic principle and the art underlying all of the various forms of practice, good and evil. For the force can be used in opposite directions according to the Hermetic principles of polarity. In this little book, we shall state the basic principles of mental transmutation, that all who read may grasp the underlying principles and thus possess the master key that will unlock many doors of the principle of polarity. We shall now proceed to the consideration of the first of the Hermetic 7 principles, the principle of mentalism, in which it is explained that the truth, that the all is mind, the universe is mental, in the words of the Kybalion. We ask the close attention and careful study of this great principle on the part of our students, for this is really the basic principle of the whole Hermetic philosophy and of the Hermetic art of mental transmutation. All right, so this is the next chapter. This is all I'm going to read for right now, but I'll come back this evening if you guys check on later, and I will have a lot more uploaded, okay? I can't sit here and just do this on my day off, but later when I find free time, I will come back and you guys can pick up where I left off. The all. Now this is a very, very deep point, and something that most people get confused about when it's usually why they like the channel and then why they leave the channel. I'm not a Christian. I don't put my faith into a box. I don't label myself. All these teachings have truths to them. You need to accept the truth. The word faith itself means to accept and believe without evidence. Therefore, I have no faith in some things because I have proof. If I have proof, it's not faith. If I have proof of his existence, or proof, therefore, that it does exist and is a real thing and has happened, or what have you, depending on the subject, then it's no longer faith. Faith is just asking you to blindly accept without evidence. And I refuse to do that. I refuse to do that in the same sense. I'd rather trust in something than have faith in something, if that makes sense. Trust is based on usually repeated behavior. You know that something is the truth. You can trust someone when they show you time and time again that they can. But they show you time and time again that no matter what they are who they are, you roll the punches and they still care. Put you down, anything like that. They probably embrace you in your life in every aspect. Even your flaws, trying to help you recognize them and transmute them into strengths, right? I hope you guys like what I've been doing here with this kind of stuff. I've tried to take it away from all the fear porn and this and that and kind of give you some examples of where these things actually show up. All right. The all, under and back of the universe of time, space, and change is ever to be found the substantial reality. Substance means that which underlies all outward manifestations, the essence reality, the thing itself, etc. Substantial means actually existing, being essential element, being real. Reality means the state of being real, true, enduring, valid, fixed, permanent, actual. Under and behind all outward appearances and manifestations, there must be always be a substantial reality. This is the law. Man, considering the universe, of which he is a unit, sees nothing but change in matter, forces, and mental states. He sees that nothing really is, but that everything is becoming and changing. Nothing stands still. Everything is being born, growing, dying. The very instant it reaches its height, it begins to decline. The law of rhythm is in its constant operation. There is no reality, enduring quality, fixity, or substantiality in anything. Nothing is permanent but change. The only constant is change. He sees all that things evolving from other things and resolving into other things. Constant action and reaction, inflow and outflow, building up and tearing down, creation and destruction, birth, growth, and re-death. The number 13 in itself, right? We have 12 zodiacal houses. 13th would be the rebirth, the rejuvenation, regeneration. 13, right? The musical scale. As you come back to E, you're an octave higher, same thing. They start all back over again. And so is the way of dimensions and frequency. Nothing endures but change. And if he be a thinking man, he realizes that all of these changing things must be outward. Outward appearances or manifestations of some underlying power, some substantial reality. All thinkers in all lands and in all times have assumed the necessity for postulating the existence of the substantial reality. All philosophies worthy of a name have been based upon this thought. Men have given the substantial reality many names, and some have called it by the term of deity, meaning there's many of them and it's a god of some sort. Others have called it the infinite and eternal energy. Others have tried to call it matter. But all have acknowledged its existence, and it is self-evident and needs no argument. In these lessons, we have followed the example of some of the world's greatest thinkers, both ancient and modern, the Hermetic, the masters, and have called the underlying power, the substantial reality, by the Hermetic name, the All, which term we consider the most comprehensive, and many terms applied to by man to that which transcends names and terms. We accept and teach the view of the great Hermetic thinkers of all times, as well as those illumined souls who have reached higher planes of being, both of whom assert that their inner nature of the all is unknowable. This must be so, for not by the all itself can comprehend its own nature and being. The Hermeticists believe and teach that the all in itself is and must ever be unknowable. They regard all theories and guesses as speculations of the theologians and metaphysicians regarding the inner nature of the all, as but the childish efforts of mortal minds to grasp the secret of the infinite. Such efforts have always failed and will always fail, from the nature of the task itself, One pursuing such inquiries travels around and around in the labyrinth of thought until he is lost to all sane reasoning, actioning, or conduct, and is utterly unfitted for the work of life. He's like a squirrel which frantically runs around and around, circling the treadmill wheel of his cage, traveling ever and yet reaching nowhere. At the end, a prisoner still, standing just where he started. I feel a lot of people are doing that. People are running. Where are they going? All right. And still more presumptuous are those who attempt to ascribe to the all the personality, qualities, properties, and characteristics and attributes of themselves, ascribing to the all human emotions, feelings, and characteristics, even down to the pettiest qualities of mankind, such as jealousy, susceptibility to flattery and praise, desire for offerings and worship, and all other survivals from the days of the childhood of our race. Such ideas are not worthy of grown men and women, and are rapidly being discarded. At this point, it may be proper for me to state that we make a distinction between religion and theology, between philosophy and metaphysics. Religion, to us, means the intuitional realization of the existence of the all and one's relationship to it, while theology means the attempts of men to ascribe personality, qualities, and characteristics to it, their theories regarding its affairs, wills, desires, plans, and designs, and their assumptions of the office of middlemen between the all and the people. Philosophy, to us, means the inquiry after knowledge of things knowable and thinkable, while metaphysics means the attempt to carry the inquiry over and beyond the boundaries into the unknowable and unthinkable, and with the same tendency as that of theology. And consequently, both religion and philosophy mean to us having things in the roots of reality, while theology and metaphysics seem like broken reeds rooted in the quicksands of ignorance, and affording naught by the most insecure support for the mind or a soul of a man. We do not insist upon our students accepting these definitions. We mention them merely to show our position. At any rate, you shall hear very little about theology and metaphysics in these lessons. But while the essential nature of the all is unknowable, there are certain truths connected with its existence which human minds find itself compelled to accept. And an examination of these reports from a proper subject of inquiry, particularly as they agree with the reports of the illumined or higher places, and that to its inquiry we invite you. That which is the fundamental truth, the substantial reality, is beyond true naming, but the wise men call it the all. In its essence, the all is unknowable. But the report and reasons must be hospitably received and treated with respect. The human reason, whose reports we must accept so long as we think at all, informs us as follows regarding the all, and that without attempting to remove the veil of the unknowable. Meaning these are the core principles that are true and can't change. The all must be all and really is. There can be nothing existing outside of the all, else the all would not be the all. Meaning nothing can be not a part of this unless it wouldn't be the all, right? It wouldn't be everything if you excluded something. So that's why I show people that looking at things dualistically, like there is literally the power versus God itself, is Luciferianism, because it's all checks and balances. It's all varying degrees of one thing. Evil is just a lack of good, right? It's just like heat. It's what they were explaining. Nothing can exist that isn't in divine order, because this is spirit and it all comes from one thing. Okay? Understand that. The all must be infinite, for there is nothing else to define, confine, bound, limit, or restrict the all. It must be infinite in time or eternal. It must have always continuously existed, for there is nothing else to have ever created it, and something can never evolve from nothing. And if it had ever not been, even for a moment, it would not be now. It must continuously exist forever, for there is nothing to destroy it, and can never not be. It can never not be, even for a moment, because something can never become nothing. It must be infinite in space. It must be everywhere, for this is no place outside of the all. It cannot be otherwise than continuous in space, without break, cessation, separation, or or interruption, for there is nothing to break, separate, or interrupt its continuity, and nothing will with and nothing with which to fill the gaps. It must be infinite in power, or absolute, for there's nothing to limit, restrict, restrain, confine, or disturb the condition. It's a subject to no other power, for there is no other power. The all must be immutable, or not subject to change in its real nature. For there's nothing to work changes upon it, nothing into which it could be changed to, or nor from which it could have changed from. It cannot be added or nor subtracted from, increased nor diminished, nor become greater or lesser in any respect whatsoever. It must have always been, must always remain, in just what it is now, the all. There has never been, is not now, and never will be anything else in which it can change. The all being infinite, absolute, eternal, unchangeable, it must follow that anything finite, changeable, fleeting, and conditioned cannot be the all, and there is nothing outside of the all in reality. Then any and all such finite things must be as nothing in reality. Now, do not become befogged or frightened. We are not trying to lead you into a Christian Science field under the cover of Hermetic philosophy. There's a reconciliation of this apparently contradictory state of affairs. Be patient. We will reach it in time. We see around us that which is called matter, which forms from the physical foundation from all forms. Is the all merely matter? Not at all. Matter cannot manifest life or mind. And as life and mind are manifested in the universe, the all cannot be matter. For nothing rises higher than its own source. Nothing is ever manifested in the effect that it is not in the cause. Nothing is evolved as a consequent that is not involved as the antecedent. And then modern science informs us that there is really no such thing as matter. That we call matter is merely interrupted energy or force. That is, energy or force at a low rate of vibration. And a recent writer said matter is melded into mystery. Even material science has abandoned the theory of matter and now rests on the basis of energy. All right, now what he's saying here is, if you're trying to simplify the all, you can't just call it matter, because matter doesn't create life. Because there's matter there, it doesn't mean it's alive. And it doesn't create consciousness. And we know consciousness exists, just to be pondering this question. And then it says, it's vibration, so is it energy? Is the all merely energy or force? Not energy or force, as the materialists use the term, for their energy and force are blind, mechanical things, devoid of life and mind. Life and mind can never evolve from blind energy or force. For this reason, given a moment ago, nothing can rise higher than its source. Nothing is evolved unless it is involved. Nothing manifests in the effect unless it is in the cause. And so, the all cannot be merely energy or force. For if it were, there would be no such thing as life and mind in its existence, and we know better than that. For we are alive and using mind to consider this very question, and so are those who claim that energy or force is everything. So what is there higher than matter or energy we know to be existent in the universe? Life and mind. Life and mind are in all their varying degrees of unfoldment. Then, you ask, do you mean to tell us that the all is life and mind? Yes and no is our answer. If you mean life and mind as we poor petty mortals know them, we say no, not at all. That is not it. But what kind of life do you mean then, you ask? The answer is living mind, is far above that which mortals know by these words, as life and mind are higher than mechanical forces or matter. Infinite living mind is compared to the finite life and mind. We mean that which the illumined souls mean when they reverently pronounce the word spirit. The all is infinite living mind. The illumined call it spirit. So I hope that clear up some of the things that I teach to you guys. And yeah, I'll be on to upload this later. Discuss, interact. Let me know what you think. Share your thoughts. Just let's get it out there. And there you go. Yep. So yeah, we'll pick up on chapter 5 later. Hope you guys enjoy.